Sure.
Unfortunately,
I
we
got
don't have a band.
I got a guitar and I know 4 chords. That gets me through a lot. That's it.
I tell you, that's funny because I've played guitar my whole life, and I really suck at it. It's
Right?
just incredible. Yeah, I don't ever play it, but basically, I tell people if I picked up a guitar, if you handed me a guitar, you would know that I had played one at one time or another, and that's pretty much the extent of
That's perfect. Well, that's I got 4 chords, and I can go through those
it.
4 chords pretty good. That's about it.
You can shred that.
Yep, exactly. I hit that G chord, the D chord, perfect, and that's where I leave it.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, absolutely, it's going to be fun. I did, as I kind of said in our intro before we went live, I did quite a bit of reading today, and because I don't know everything or everybody out there, and want to catch up a little bit more, and I was actually, I one thing that stands out. I was reading an article that you had done about a 57, and you said that you weren't particularly happy with it because of the flex of the body. And so
Correct.
I have to ask because I'm a hardtop guy. I've got a hardtop. I like the hardtops. So my question is, how much power were you putting to that thing to get her to twist and do, or what was your reasoning in saying that?
That's not a matter of that. It was, and I would stand by that. Basically, we have to start with, and I've said this a million times. Every vehicle I build, they're pretty. They look cool. They sit cool. None of that matters to me as much as it has to be fun to drive. It has to be comfortable. And it has to ride well. And I built the 55, which I'm sure we'll go into all the gory details of that build. But the 55, over the years, there may be, there have been times in the past where a year would go by and I didn't drive it. So basically 2 years. But every time I get in that car, I start it up within a quarter mile, I start giggling to myself and go, I'm driving a pro stock Cadillac here. I mean, that freaking car rides better than any vehicle I've ever owned, and that's daily drivers inclusive, not just hot rods. But anyway, so when I acquired the 57, and that's a big story as well, but when I acquired the 57, my goal was to outdo the 55 as far as a hot rod in general is concerned. And one of the things was the fact that it was a manual transmission. I thought it would be more fun. It's going to
Yes,
have air
manual
conditioning.
transmission.
Yeah, it's going to have air conditioning, 22 speaker stereo. Um, I'm missing something here that I just thought of. And electronic fuel injection, and just build an all around really really nice driver. And I got the whole car finished, and it rode okay, but it didn't ride like the 55. And it steered okay, but it wasn't the same as a 55. And the air conditioning, whatever, and the stereo, whatever. But overall, just driving characteristics, I like the 55 a lot better. And when I try and analyze things, just in general, I think it's because the car's a hardtop. It flexes more, going over bumps and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I
Right.
mean, and I suppose I could be totally full of it, but that's just my logic was that the 55 is more rigid because of the structure of the body.
Very
Oh,
well could
absolutely.
be. And that's the
Absolutely.
55 is a sedan, correct?
Correct.
Versus a hardtop as a sedan. Or the 57 is a hardtop.
57 was a hardtop.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
Well,
might twist and flex more.
I remember the first time when I was building my car, and I'm new to the game, Scott. I mean, my car. Give you a little background. I tell everybody it was my dad's. He bought it in '69. He passed away, 17 years ago. I got the car, sat for a long time. I started putting it together, and that's when we started the Try Five Mob to kind of help myself and other people build cars, give advice, and do stuff. And
Right.
I I was so happy because I put my windows in, I put my flippers in, and everything myself. And I was like, and the flippers work. It's like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
And I had it up, I put it back up on the jack stands, but I had to, instead of putting it onto the axle, I put The front end was on the control arms, and then I put the
Yeah.
jack stands under the frame, and all of a sudden my door and windows didn't want to open and shut properly,
Yeah,
and
I
I'm
knew where
freaking.
you were going with that.
Yeah, I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my god, I broke my flippers. What did I do? My windows aren't doing this. And I remember I talked to Brian Machad, who's a member of the mob, and he goes, where's your jacks at? And I said, under the frame. He goes, what about the front? I said, on the suspension. He goes, don't worry about it. Your car is flexing, and that's exactly what it. So I get
Correct.
totally what you're saying, because the minute I put the car down, the flippers worked again. I'm like, oh, thank God, you know.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
But
Yeah.
no, and so I had to ask about that just because the hardtop thing is kind of a thing that we do here, because we have a little sedan versus hardtop rivalry, which is better. And
Well, I'll tell you something that's interesting about that in particular. I've realized that throughout your lifetime, and more importantly, this applies to not just hot rods, it applies to everything in life. Your taste in music, your taste in food, et cetera, et cetera. But your taste in cars specifically change over the years. And for as long as I can remember, it was 55 sedan, no interest in a 55 hardtop. 57 sedan, no interest in a 57 hardtop.
Yep.
And as the years went on, again, I had history with the black 55. So regardless of whether it was a sedan or hardtop, I was going to end up owning that car. But I I had already had the 55. I grew to love 57 hardtops and didn't so much care about 57 sedans anymore. I'm not telling you I disliked them, I just never cared as much. But 55 hardtops, never cared about them. And I tell you what, I love them now.
Oh well.
So
Hey.
things change, things
well,
change.
I could tell you, because I grew up in a very small town in Minnesota. We had a 55 Chevy that came out of the shed every 2-3 years. It was my dad's, and it was parked, and we came down to I can't remember what it was called. It was about 1988, 1989. We had Street Rod Nationals or something came to Minneapolis area. And so we
Yep.
came down to do it. And he goes, well, there's a 55. I go, no, what's this? I didn't know what the sedan, the Post was, because I'd only seen
Right.
a hardtop, because there wasn't
Right.
another 55 Chevy in northern Minnesota that I seen, So, and we didn't get a lot of magazines, and it's not that we were poor, but we just didn't have magazines. We didn't do a lot of that stuff. And so I remember seeing that first, going, oh, okay, I get it. It's different, And so, but I used to type on all the Facebook pages when I'd see a nice hardtop. Hardtops rule, and it was just my thing. And then all of a sudden, a couple sedan guys get a little butt hurt, and they come back with a saying, and we go back. And to this
Yeah.
day, we go back and forth, about who's got the ugly chicks with their car or this or that. And
Right,
it's funny.
right.
But I tell people, if you ever get a chance, I said, truthfully, I think it probably, if you're just doing even just a plain restoration to original, the hardtop takes a lot more money to do, because the amount of stainless and the flippers and all that you don't
Right.
have on the other, it's ridiculous. And so, I wouldn't mind doing an all flat black, no trim, no nothing, gasser.
Sure. Yeah.
The when you're building, and I know we're going to go through a bunch of cars, and I can try to keep it right, but like I said, I've got so many questions, because I was reading just a lot of different fun articles about you. And obviously I've seen your Cheese Whiz, and I never knew until Dan says, well, we've got Scott Sullivan Cheese Whiz. I was like, okay, I didn't know what that was, but I've seen the car a million
Right.
times. But what strikes me funny is that you look at your car, and we've posted a few pictures on the mob page, and I've looked at quite a few. It looks like it was built yesterday, because did you know at the time, obviously back in '89, when you put this car together, that look would basically maintain and be cool for 30 years, because so many cars are fat. I like my car. I did to look old school to a point. I don't want it to get dated. Yours doesn't
Right.
look dated at all. And
Well,
did you have
and
any idea on that?
I appreciate you saying that, but there are people that would argue that with you. And oddly, because I mean, it's incredible how the 55 has sustained popularity even after 32 years. On the internet, social media, there's a picture of it somewhere, some site, blah, 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 at least once every 3 weeks. I mean, after all this time.
Oh,
But so
when
you're
I
gonna
go and
get
I
a
look
lot.
for when I look for pictures, there's between Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook, and I mean, there's so many pictures out there. I've looked and it's like, okay, this thing has been covered to death,
Yeah.
since before, since before us,
Well,
car
and
dorks
and
wanted to.
actually and actually, Wheel Hub magazine just photographed my '54 Chevy. They photographed it in October, and it is in their current issue number 13. But
Mm-hmm.
Robert McGaffin is the individual who photographed it, and he called me and he said, "I want to do your 55." Now, he doesn't want to do it for the magazine per se. He said that he's chosen, and I'm embarrassed to say I can never remember the fourth. He's chosen four vehicles that he wants to photograph in depth and
Correct.
either have a magazine or a coffee table book with those four cars. And it was Cadzilla, my car, uh, Glenn Grosage from Billet Specialties, the Rad Rides Troy Chicane 62 Biscayne,
Yep.
and
Right.
one other car. So they, people still want to photograph it. But to go back to your question, um, you'd have to. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a point about. So the car gets photographed a lot, or gets photographs get posted a lot, and there are plenty of people who still they don't know what it is. Some younger people, et cetera, et cetera. And I see comments like, "Put the door handles back on it."
No, never.
Nice, but lose the painted bumpers. You need chrome bumpers on that. Um, and then, of course, my phone is still
Yeah,
my phone's a low
we
power
can
mode.
still we can still hear you. Oh, low power. Do you need to plug it into a charger?
You know what? That I can't believe it. It was well, I can believe it. It was on 100%. What do we do here?
You got a charger you can plug it into real quick?
Well, I'm gonna have to run go get it.
Okay, that's fine.
Go
Go
get
ahead
it.
and
Um,
run and grab your
I will.
charger.
I'm gonna do
well, hang,
magic tricks with fire.
actually, I'll tell you what. Maybe I'll let me see if I can walk and we can. Meanwhile, I'll keep talking. So anyway, people have critiqued the car, um, as if it were, oh yeah, you need to do this and do that. But what they don't
Right.
realize is that car was built with a specific, very specific look in mind, and okay, how am I going to get rid of that glare? Is that glare bothering you guys?
We're good.
Me?
What
Oh,
if you
okay.
turn a little bit?
Yeah, I'll try and do that here in a second. Let me plug this phone charger in.
Okay. We're no strangers
And
to technical
and
difficulties, Scott.
and Scott, I'm going to tell you, 2 out of the 3 last times I've been on, I've had to get a power cord, so don't worry about it.
Well, basically, I've got a crappy phone, battery wise, is why that's happening. Okay, now I'm going to see about turning.
That's
Doesn't really
better.
help much, does it?
Oh, it looks good.
That's better.
Okay. Anyway, so people will critique the car, but what they don't realize is, and this is a tirade, I'm an artist and I look at things as a whole. And my vision for the 55, the intention was to create a I wanted it to. I use the term funny car, but it doesn't look like a funny car. That's not what I want. I wanted it to look like a race car, or, um, for example, the grill and all the trim pieces being brushed. That kind of emulates painted trim on a funny car.
Right.
Um, the bumpers being painted, fiberglass bumpers. Um, the window trim, the front and rear glass window trim being painted makes the windows look smaller. Um,
Correct.
so that's the way, and experimenting with finishes like brush trim and stuff like that. That's all just me being artsy.
Now,
But
how did you go
once
about the
again,
brushed? how'd you go about the brushed finish on the stainless? I mean, was it just kind of like take a red Scotch Brite and just drag it the whole length, or
Yeah, good luck.
you
Good
know?
luck with that. um, a lot of experimentation. I
Okay.
knew specifically what I wanted, and when you think about it, as I'm looking out of the corner of my eye, yes, the cat's going to be bugging us. But anyway, when you think about it, you have the stainless trim,
Mm-hmm.
you have pot metal or chrome plated pot metal for the
Right.
grill and the grill surround. And then that there's actually the grill is fabricated from aluminum, and all of that I wanted all that stuff to match as close as I could.
Right.
And if you take red Scotch Brite to stainless, you're almost going to sort of dull it, and that's the extent of it. I
Okay. Yeah,
want
I suppose since
coarse,
stainless is so hard.
yes, I want coarse lines. So we experimented and experimented, and finally dressed a polishing wheel with the nastiest rouge
Uh-oh.
you can possibly imagine, which it had.
Okay.
When it dries, it's like rock hard. And basically, then we ran the stainless up and down it to
Okay.
create those lines. All of the trim, the headlight rings, the marker lights, the tail lights, and the grill surround. You can buy all that stuff new, and frankly, it's all pretty nice stuff. So I bought some. I took it and had it stripped of its chrome, and then there was a process that I was experimenting with aluminum spray,
Mm-hmm.
and I had the part sprayed with aluminum and then tried to brush the aluminum and didn't get any results that were worth crap. So I had to go buy all new pieces again. I had them
Mm-hmm.
stripped again down to pot metal, and then I just ended up brushing the pot metal and clearing it.
Okay.
Oh,
And
cool.
those pieces are a little bit grayer than the rest, but there comes a point where you have to go, Uncle, I give up. Okay, it's good enough.
Right. No, I get that. That's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
to do the little subtle things I was reading about, and you know, the subtle changes. Like if you didn't own, for instance, I was just watched I think 3 videos of you on in your 54 that you've done, and
Right.
the all the little subtle details. Unless you're a fan of 54s and you know the body lines and all
Right.
the little things, you're not going to know the difference in what you do. You know,
Correct.
and I love the second thing, as I've said my whole life, you can take almost any car and wreck it with a set of wheels. If you don't have the right wheels,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't look right. And the wheels is
Right.
what helps your stance. And I know that I read, like I said, over the weekend, I read many things. It was all about stance. And I think there's a lot of guys that'll always agree, because you can have a car that if the stance is not right, the whole car isn't right, because that's where it
Correct.
starts. And
Yes, very much. Very important.
we've got one gentleman here on the mob. His name's Brian, who has he's got a 55, and it's what he calls static drop, because he doesn't have ride tech or airbags. It's all just the geometry,
Hmm.
and it's super low. I don't know his exact. I think his cross member underneath is like 2 1/8 inches off the ground or something. He brags, and it's the
Right.
stance is what it's known for. It's internet famous. When he posts a picture up, everybody shares it because it's just got that stance. So
Well,
when
go back and you you can go back and tell him that my the bottom of my front fenders, where they meet the rocker, are 3 inches, and my cross member's 5.
okay, well,
Well,
and
Which again is it's the way
you
the car was built.
right, and
right.
so you've obviously got some comfort in that ride, where
Absolutely.
there's a lot of guys that drop and lower their cars that don't have the nice comfortable ride,
Correct.
because it's going to ride stiffer. My car isn't, it's lower than stock, but it's not slammed to the ground. But I like the ride, but you're right. When I was reading, a stance, and looking at your cars that you've done, I mean, obviously, once again, as I'm looking at the picture on the screen here of the 55, how many 55s truly back then when you went to a show were as low as yours?
Well, and I always made that joke. You could have a 55 Chevy with stock suspension, airbags on it, and let all the air out, and my car's lower.
Yep. No,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
and then, like I said,
and
I don't.
looking at yours, I can see where a friend of mine, I did his '67 Chevelle last year, Jeff Carl's. I can see where
Yeah,
he was coming from and wanting to get the stance on the thing. I'm looking at the picture of your 55, and he's got pretty much a stance that's modeled pretty close to how the 55 is,
as
and
much
I
as you can
see
do.
right.
Yeah, as much as you can do with stock suspension.
What's the matter, Daniel?
So
You got
I
bugs in
got a
there?
Yeah, you
I got a
okay?
fly buzzing around in here. So
The um, you know, the biggest thing is, like I said, when you're dealing with stance. So when you start a project, obviously, I don't care which car it is. What's the first thing? Do you draw a picture? Do you just start making notes, or do you have a concept?
I already know. I mean, it's um, almost embarrassing because most everything that I do, everything, the first goal is for it to be planted on the ground. And to be honest with you, even that in my mind gets a little old. So I'll shift gears real quick. I'll touch on one of my childhood cars. You know, the hot rod guys that I grew up with. There was a '57 Ford sedan,
hmm
and I have been chasing a '57 Ford sedan locally here for 2 years now. I mean, I'm trying to get the guy to sell it to me, and he keeps saying that he will, but so far I don't see any daylight there. But
it's
anyway, in
going to
my
be the
mind, I
car
thought,
sitting out in the weeds out back. Oh, I'll get to it someday. Oh,
oh
I'll
no,
get
he
to it
drives
someday.
it. No, this is a nice car. He drives
Okay.
it, but it's a six-cylinder three-speed. But anyway, so I've done so much slamming on the ground, blah blah blah, and that's no easy task. I mean, first you have to deal with the front suspension, then you're going to have to deal with the transmission, then the drive shaft, then the rear end. You have to put a drive shaft tunnel in it, a training tunnel in it. There's a lot to make one sit low and ride well. But anyway, otherwise, I mean, you just compromise on how low you're going to get it. So I wanted to do this '57 Ford, and I thought, why don't I build like a '60s look and actually raise it up, not a lot, just a little, maybe 2 inches all the way around from stock, and then I've got a cool set of Americans that I want to put on it, and big and littles, and then as my mind goes on, I'm like, yeah, and I'll put a deep oil pan on it, and put a tack on the dash, and just make a '60s looking car, and
Right.
then I see a hammered on the ground '57 sedan, and just go, oh my god, that's go, oh my god. So I don't know if I'll ever do it, but I do think about doing something different. But once again, to go back to your question, man, I will set a car up and basically take all the suspension out from under it, front and rear, and put it on blocks, and just piddle with where I want the car to sit. Now, the unfortunate part of that is once you see something, there's a saying everyone says, you can't unsee it. Once I see something sitting where I want it, it's hell or high water. It's going to sit there no matter what it takes.
Right.
Right.
So it's a bit of a
And
challenge.
well, and that's where I think, you know, it starts with obviously the dream and seeing it, and and how you want it to see it, or you've seen somebody else's and you want. I hate to say the word mimic because so many people go want to change it and or do like somebody else does, and you're obviously beyond that point. And but to get it to sit low, have like on the any of your cars, even the 50, your 54, which we haven't talked about yet, but I mean, big meats under the back end, sitting low. As you said in the one video, it's a hot rod. That's you got the T56 in it. When you're building it, I mean, does it start with stance, the look, and then drivetrain and color? How do you make your decisions?
Well, and actually, each vehicle has been fairly different. Um, I mean, I can tell you that initially, the '55 Cheese Whiz was supposed to be small block, TPI, 700R, air conditioned, power steering, power brakes, and it has a '69 Camaro front subframe in it. that is a rear steer. The steering gearbox is behind the cross member.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to make the steering column, they didn't line up. Well, actually, let me back up. When I went to put a power steering gearbox in it, power steering gearbox had firewall, and I thought and decided the only thing to do was make it a manual steering car. As soon as I put the manual steering gearbox in that car, I said, you know what? If I can't have power steering, power brakes, et cetera, I guess I'm building a race car. So that changed to a big block right away.
Right.
Yeah.
But actually, in that case, Ace in my pocket, fairly mild acquaintance at that time with John Lingenfelder.
Oh, cool.
And but my buddy Jeff Smith was a good friend of John Lingenfelder's. So I called John for advice, and I went and bought a new Chevrolet 454 450 horse LS6 motor, crate motor from Chevrolet, and I called John Lingenfelder for camshaft advice. And before that conversation was over, we ended up using, oh dear, the block and heads,
I
and I
think
think
that's what you were
every
telling me
square inch
last
of the
week.
rest of it, yeah, every bit of it is all, a stroker motor and 496 and blah blah blah. But that started out with just a phone call, and then it just escalated from there. But in the case of the 54, real quick, it was supposed to be a gray primered small block with a Paxton supercharger and another 700 R4. And was I telling you about the Lingenfelder deal there?
Yeah.
Well, the fact that they had approached me and asked me about supplying my engines for my hot rods.
I think you had
Ring
said
a bell,
something
or
about that. Um,
I don't. Well, at any rate, I was supposed to get a Lingenfelder LS motor for. I was initially it was going to be a small block. Then I was offered a Lingenfelder LS motor, and then they bailed on me, and my car was set up for
uh,
a. Now I set it up for an LS motor where it wasn't initially, and so
right.
then they left me scrambling where I had to come up with the motor, and I called Scott and Dickey Chevrolet, and they hooked me up.
Very cool. So I'm going to backtrack many, many years then. What's your background before the car, before the 55? Where'd you get your knowledge or skill, or where'd the passion come from?
Well, and it's been a passion since I was a child. Can't explain it. My father could not be remotely interested in the automobile. I had a cousin who was, and as it happens, a neighbor across the street and down 3 doors down. Uh, and I hate dating myself like this, but some of my early memories, there was a family down the street, had a bunch of sons, and the oldest son bought a '60 Chevy new in 1960, and I was 5, and I can remember standing on the sidewalk and watching him wash that '60 Chevy. It was red with a white interior, red interior, and might have had chrome reverse and baby moons on it. But
Right.
he went to Vietnam. He went to Vietnam, and so the next younger brother kind of took me under his wing and basically taught me how to paint. Gave me what we'll call not, what am I trying to say here? The desire to do things right, you
Right.
know. And but like I said, he taught me how to paint, and he was the one with the '57 Ford sedan. But uh, my first car was a Volkswagen. My mother bought me a Volkswagen when I was 15 for $50 because she was terrified of me getting a driver's license. And so she thought if she bought a Volkswagen for $50 that the motor was blown up, that she would just kind of prevent me from getting my license. And my neighbor down the street and I bought a Scat. I forget what it was, 1230 cc motor, and I won the local car show with that Volkswagen. 8 months later, it was white pearl and had flared fenders, and SS, my first set of SS Kragers, and then uh, somehow or another, because this was 1973, I traded my Volkswagen was a 1964. I traded that Volkswagen even up for a 1971, a 2-year-old car, Dodge Demon. It was 344 speed and had a big camshaft in it. And as soon as I did that, I remember my mentor down the street said, "Okay, now you got a hot rod. Now you're going to be breaking stuff, clutches, rear ends, blah blah blah." Which I tell you what, that Demon was indestructible. I beat it to death. But that Demon was actually in Carcraft magazine in 1974. Um, and it was just a little, Carcraft used to do little blurbs. Um, Rodden at Random, I think, was Hot Rod.
Mm-hmm.
But just had a little blurb on it. Showed me. And then in, well, in 1976, I bought uh, a local race car, and it was a '67 Nova that was tugged
Right.
and no motor and transmission. And it took me 2 years, but I finished it, and that ended up being Street Machine of the Year, and also, and I love saying this because it drives people out of their mind. The first, not just my car, but there was a group of cars, 3 or 4 of them. Rod, Popular Hot Rodding did a magazine article, and they said, "We see a trend developing in the hot rod world, and we would like to call it Pro Street." And they said, "We feel that these cars are, you know, the vehicles that emulate what we're talking about." So
Right.
the term for Pro Street, that's the first time it had ever been written, and it was written about my car and a couple other cars. So if you go on the Facebook page, any of the Facebook pages that have the word Pro Street in them, just go
Right.
ahead and type in who had the first Pro Street car. If you want entertainment, then go get some popcorn, because I tell you what, my great
No.
great grandfather had a Conestoga wagon back in 1870 that had dual pairs of wagon wheels on it. I mean, it goes on and on. Grumpy Jenkins had the first Pro Street car. Don Nicholson had the first Pro. It's endless. But anyway, that's the facts as we know them.
Right.
Right. No, that's
Now,
that's just timeless.
now, out of curiosity, kind of getting back to the 55 here. How did you come up with the color, and how did the name even come about? And does it actually match the color of Cheese Whiz?
First of all, it absolutely does not anywhere close. Um, I, as I said, that car was initially going to be TPI motor, 700R, power steering, power brakes, and to
Right.
be honest with you, it was going to be red. And my even then, I didn't want to paint it red, but I was trying to create something that looked both hard ass and expensive. Um, and red was the only thing I could come up with. And my girlfriend said, "Why not paint it orange?" And I said, "I don't think you can have orange and be classy. Orange is kind of in your face." And about that time, a guy from Maryland, or Delaware, I'm sorry, a guy from Delaware built a 33 Willys Cabriolet convertible. And it was basically GM Omaha orange with a tan top. And it was beautiful.
Right.
It was a very classy car. And I thought, you know what? I'll bet I could do this. So we started experimenting with oranges until we came up with that color. It's just two mixing bases mixed together. But so fast forward to while we're building it, that car was built by myself and a very good one. And side by side every day building this car. And while we were building it, I mean, at that point, if I did something, it was going to be in a magazine. Magazines waited to see what I was going to create,
Right.
and so we started making fun one day of magazine articles and
Mm-hmm.
how they have to have a I don't know, tagline. I don't know what you would call it, but the beginning of the article it always has some cool name or something. In the case of my Blue Nova Carcraft, it said "Cold Blue Steel" and stuff like that. So Joe and I were talking one day, and I said, "Boy, I can just hear it now, sun-kissed orange." And Joe started laughing, and he said, "It's Cheese Whiz," and we both bust out laughing. And
Right.
so I told Jeff Smith while we were traveling cross country with the car, and take two knuckleheads driving along across the country, just give them an idea and they're going to run with it. And Jeff was like, "Hey, why don't we get a Cheese Whiz bottle and make it look like it's having an IV of Cheese Whiz, or we'll put Cheese Whiz in the microwave and pour it down the trunk lid." And so it escalated to that point, and we did both of those things. I took a clear plastic tube and poured the color of the 55 into the tube, so the tube was the color, and
Right.
then we stuck it and made an IV bottle, and had it going into the carburetor of the 55 in one of the photographs. And then there's another photograph of the 55 with, it looks like I'm pouring Cheese Whiz on the trunk lid, and that's exactly what I'm doing. But I had to mix red food coloring with the Cheese Whiz to get it the color of the car.
Okay.
So but basically, if you microwave Cheese Whiz, it gets soupy, and so
Yep.
I just kept putting red food coloring in it and stirred it up and running out and holding it up next to the car, like you would paint. And then eventually we got it to where we wanted to do it. So Jeff's taking the photograph. I'm pouring it down my trunk lid, and I'm going, hurry up, Jeff, come on, hurry up, Jeff, because when it goes down behind my bumper, I
Right.
have a belly pan. I can't get at it. And I was like, hurry up. But anyway, yeah, that's the color. Because
Oh,
there
that's
are
awesome.
people to this day that think that it is the color of Cheese Whiz. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Because Cheese Whiz is pretty nasty, more of a school bus yellow.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird color.
Well, and so many cars, like I said, it's, to me, looking at the car, I wouldn't guess that it's built in '89. Because when I think of
No.
'89, every Tri-5 or Pro Street car, whatever you want to see that Super Chevy magazine had, it was
They
some
had that
early
granite
90s.
looking graphics and
Well, it had like the teal
Yeah.
and pink double stripe coming by the rear
Oh,
wheels and
oh.
looping around, and you still see it. Like we go back to the '50s, which is 20 minutes from my house, and and you
Right.
see these guys, and honestly, there's a lot of beautiful cars that you go, man, that probably looked really good back in '91, but it needs a respray because it dated itself so much so fast.
Well, there are a couple things about that. I mean, I uh, initially started building a reputation being a painter
Right.
and a graphics guy, and you have to have the common sense to know when to put graphics on something. And the 55 stainless
Yeah.
trim is your graphic. Anything you do on the side of that car, you're just going to fight that and make it look terrible.
Well, and
Right.
that's why on my
that's why
car,
there's no.
I did the graphic. I've got a little old lady with a shopping cart holding a cane, and she says, or it says, your grandma never got groceries like this, because my car is a race car. It was a little old lady car. I put it on the trunk rather than trying to put it on the side or anything.
Right, right. And my car actually has graphics on both sides of the frame rails, the trunk lid,
Mm-hmm.
and then the engine compartment, the air cleaner has a little bit of art on it. So anyway, oh no, and inside the glove box. But you put art where it belongs, and it's a combination of the people that own those vehicles, but there are tasteless artists out there who think, oh, a blank canvas. No, it's not a blank canvas. There's a bunch of stainless breaking that up for a reason.
Right.
So
Now, I know you've put a lot of miles on the car. You've gone cross country in it. How is the paint holding up after 30 years?
Well, it's very very annoying because the '67 Nova was built in 1979, so it was painted in 1978, and it's acrylic lacquer. It looks like the day I painted it. And the '55 was painted in 1987, and it's acrylic lacquer. And I could have painted it with urethane, but at that time I didn't know enough about urethane. I did know about lacquer, and even at that time they started taking the lead out of the paint, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, if you walk up on the '55, every square inch of it is checked. And I guess it could progressively get worse. It's livable with now for me. I'll never have the time to repaint it. There are a lot of people that say, "Oh, that's patina. You can't paint that," but it's not perfect anymore. So
Well, and probably when you did it, it was, it probably had what, 10 or 15 coats of color,
yeah, who knows?
and probably another 10 or 15 coats of clear. I can
Yeah,
remember my
but again,
dad talking about his '58. The flames that he did on it. I think he said there was like 20 or 30 coats of clear to bury the big metal flake that was. It wasn't necessarily rainbow
oh
flake. It was
yeah,
a flake that changed colors, as you moved around.
right. Yeah, trying to bury metal flake is a nightmare with lacquer. I
Oh
did it when I
yeah,
was in seventh grade.
it's bad
tried
enough with urethane.
tried to Yeah, I tried to paint my bicycle metal flake, and I got wore out trying to put clear on it.
What I'm going to jump to your 54 because I really like the 54. I know we're a Tri 5 page, but I really like
Right.
the lot of subtle touches on your 54. And the paint to me, and this is my opinion, but I'm looking at it right now on I think mid-century style, some fuelcurve.com or something. But you're driving down the road. If a guy didn't know obviously I know it's not original colors, but the colors are so subtle and rich on it that it almost looks like kind of like a high end GM color, and you know that it's almost like the original colors with a lot of extra to it. You know what I mean? Because it's not
Right.
something goes,
Sure.
oh, that never came in that color. It could have. It looks that nice.
Yeah. Um, the color. I've always been a fan of a champagne looking color, and I can't recall if '54 has a color. I assume I'm sure they had a brown that was similar. Uh, but you're right. That was a lot of the intention there. And but again, I've always been a big fan of champagne cinnamon looking colors, and so I knew what I wanted uh, for a start. And I went rather than see something on a car driving around, which there are plenty of versions.
Hmm.
Let me think. 2000 Chrysler has a really pretty one. But anyway, I went to the paint store, and it's R&M brand paint, and they have I get their color chips, I guess, for matching, and they're like 2 by 3 inches, and they're maybe 200 of them or so. I could be wrong, 150 in a stack. And so they're just slight variations, and they keep, like gradient almost changing. And I took
Hmm.
the champagne looking colors out in the sun, and I fanned it open, and that color specifically just jumped. And I thought, okay, that's over with. But to have a matching or a mating color for it, as you see it, some kind of cream looking color, that was a
Right.
nightmare. My initial idea in my head was GM Frost Beige, 1980,
Mm-hmm.
and GM Frost Beige against my color looked yellow. So I went through the color stack, and I found a color, and I liked it. And I came home, and I did a spray out of it. I did a spray out of both colors and cleared them, and they laid on my kitchen table for, I know, 3 months. I eat breakfast. I'd sit and stare at the colors. The sun be coming in the window, and I'd look at them and tilt them sideways and blah blah blah. And after 3 months, I was literally walking through the kitchen one day, and I looked over on the kitchen table, and I thought, "Am I not done with this?" It's just something bugged me. So I went back to the paint store, and boy, that color I found, in my opinion, I mean, aside from feeling it's perfect, but it it looked dirty to me, which in turn looked old, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Well,
Yeah.
I
and
mean,
that the
because
paint on that does that color does kind of give it an old color per
yeah,
se, you know.
yeah, yep. But again, as I've gotten older, really fussy with color. I mean, that, like I said, that roof color, I went on and on. Um, I won't even go into the nightmare of trying to get the upholstery fabric. I had it dyed the color that it is. But a good example, it took me 5 hours to make a dash color that I was happy with. Just a chocolate looking brown. Because, oh,
Right.
that's got too much green in it. That's got too much red in it. Back and forth, back and forth. But
I
yeah,
I know how that
in
goes trying to
retrospect,
tint colors just for stuff that's here at the body shop, crash work that we do, besides
exactly.
restoration stuff.
Yep.
I, you touched on your upholstery, and I found it kind of touching that you, what was it, 8 years of working on this car because there was an accident and other things that happened. But when you brought it to upholstery, can you tell us about a little bit about the your upholstery guy and the patience you had to have with him?
Uh, so after the crash, which I was on my way to him, I'm in Dayton, Ohio. He was in Louisville, Kentucky. His name's Larry Sneed. And um, after the crash, it took, I guess, a total probably of another year. I mean, I put the car, it took more than a year because I put the car away the day after it was destroyed. I put it in a warehouse for about 8 months,
Mm-hmm.
and I got it out. I got it out, and I walked around it for 2 or 3 weeks. I just walk around and study what was wrong and how to try and fix it. And there were plenty of people that would say, "Well, can't you just get another fender?" No, the fender has tons and tons and tons of subtle modifications. You know, the doors, tons and tons more work than I've ever had in a door. And so I had to fix the pieces that were there. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, when I did get the car back together, I took the car back to Larry Sneed, and oh golly, it was probably 3 or 4 days. No, I'm not remembering the timeline. It could have been. He said he was going to be done in 6 weeks, and I think on the sixth week, his wife called me and she was in tears, and she
Uh
said,
oh.
"Larry's not going to be able to finish your car." She said he's got some cancer that he needs to tend to, and uh, they need to do. He's in actually in the hospital, and so I said, "Okay." This is on a Saturday, and I didn't know what to do. So Monday, Larry called me from the hospital, and he said, "I gotta do this operation, blah blah blah." Uh, and he said they're telling me that I should be 9 days recovery. So he said, "You're welcome to do what you want." He said, "I still want to do your car." And I said, "I want you to do my car." I said, "I'll tell you what, Larry." I said, "You tend to your health, do what you got to do. Just let my car sit in your garage. You know, I waited this long. I'll just wait it out."
Right.
Well, that 9 day recovery was a year, and so it just sat there until he finally felt good enough to do it.
No, the reason I bring that up is that's kind of it's you know some guys have it, some guys don't. I'm not a very patient person with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so when you're at that point of basically you just went through rebuilding the car, which I'm sure was a
Right.
heartache
Oh
and
yeah.
knuckle buster, and then to show that kind of patience when you really just wanted a car in 6 weeks, and going,
Yeah.
but you realize that at the end of the day, business,
Health
friendship,
is more
whatever you want
important. Yeah.
is more important. So, because I'm kind of going at this, I think Daniel knows we're going to just give 5 minutes to this. We had a year ago, July 9th, a guy named Michael Hummel joined our Facebook group and our page. And we don't let a lot of people in, be honest with you. We probably have about 60 guys always in the waiting list because I try to keep it smaller because I like to get to know the guys. I don't want just a
Right.
Facebook page with 13,000 guys posting pictures of front end Fridays. And so, and Mike from day one, started participating. That's one thing we like. And some guys have more time than others, and some, I get that. Not everybody's on Facebook every single day, but
Right.
Mike openly called me right away, and I'm like, I'm at work. It's 80 degrees out. I'm working with tools, and like, who is this guy? And God, he's a little too gun ho. And then it got into, he had like a T-shirt. Hey, do you got any hats? And so I sent him some stuff, and he needed a couple parts that I had. So I sent him the parts. And through the first few months, and he did this with quite a few members, just created conversation. And he would post up videos of he had a 57 hardtop. He was putting an LS motor in it. He was customizing the hood so it was opening like a 94 Corvette, and some very cool stuff. For right away, I got out of him. He basically, within the first couple of conversations, he goes, well, it's going to be tough for me. I'm starting chemo, and he had liver cancer. And so he's been posting and working on this car, collecting parts, and been a great participator, more than 90% of us on this page, and posting that fun stuff. He went out of his way to make a trip from Indiana to up into Wisconsin to meet some of the guys on a little road trip one day. But unfortunately, his health took a turn for the worse, and he passed away this past Saturday. And what's really nice is I'm going to announce it here. We've been, I kind of put a post up on the page saying, hey, let's, here's my PayPal. Let's get everybody chip in $5-10, whatever you can afford. Let's, send a bouquet of flowers or whatever you do for, to someone like this. And it's been really nice. And so as of right now, we're going to have about a $300 flower arrangement given out at his services or memorial services. And his family's going to get a check for about another $1,100 on top of that from the mob.
Wow.
And it's just, I'm going to basically put in there, this is for fun. Do something Mike wanted you to do with this money. Go somewhere, do something. I don't know the financial situations. I don't think there's any financial problems in the house, stuff like that. And I've been chatting with, I think one of his stepdaughters. He's got a little larger family. And so it's just really a good thing to do, and it feels good to be able to do that. And I'm pretty strong on the Instagram stuff. And Dan Chuck took his picture today and put it up on their page and listed, Mike Hummel of Indiana is building this, unfortunately, and it listed what happened. They took it right off my Instagram page. And, I put some videos, and there was a video he took last fall when he put the car and it was running. There was no fenders on, no hood. He took it out in this dirt field and just ran it for like 20 minutes in circle and just doing circles and whipping it around. And I remember him telling me, I'm like, dude, why would you do that? Rock chips and that. And trust me, the car is stripped to the bare metal, right? He goes, I might not get a chance to drive it once I take it apart again. And a little bit of foresight. And I think Michael was 53, and it hit home a little bit with me because my dad was 55 when he passed away from cancer.
Right.
And so, that's passion right there. And this is kind of why we do this group. And that's why today, reading and watching the story about, your upholstery guy and having the patience and stuff like that. Hey, let him have it. It's your trusted guy. And that's just, it kind of rang home. And so it's a good little segue, because I want to announce, because we've had a really good response, and there's been a couple really generous people. Like I said, all I asked was for $5 from people, let's get a flower arrangement. And when you can give, I think they call it a spray, like something like the funeral where you put it, it's like a big flower arrangement at the, like over a Kentucky Derby horse or whatever.
Yeah.
For $200-300, he's going to have a heck of a one. And I'll show you, I got this going out in the mail tomorrow, our logo, because I'm going to send this to the florist to put right in it. so they know who to have. And I'll show you the picture I got printed. I'm going to get this framed to send with it. This is his car with his hood.
There you go.
And so, and that's
bare metal in the picture.
That's bare metal and Bondo and the hood all hinged up. And
now I'm sure it's probably too soon to be asking these questions. Is there somebody in the family interested in the car or no?
I don't know. It didn't, from talking to Michael, it didn't sound, I know he's got a son. I don't know. I don't think his son was too interested in the stuff, but at some point, He's got the mob banner in his garage. He's got mob stickers on everything that he was had toolboxes. I gave him stickers for it, and you know whether the car sits or it goes to a new owner or son takes it, um, you know, hopefully, hopefully this is sitting in the front seat when they get the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I printed off one for myself because I got a little wall in my garage of special pictures, and it just like I said, Mike would call me, and I would look at my wife and I go, "It's that guy in Indiana. What does he want now?" But he would reach out to me during the day and he goes, "Hey, what are you working on?" I said, "I'm building a pergola." He goes, "Show me a picture," because he was a carpenter in the union, and so I sent him a picture, and it was basically the fact that it kept his mind off the chemo, and when he was down and out and doing stuff, and so kind of cool. But so I don't want to drone on about that. But Mike was a good guy, and we did a good thing as a group, and I'm looking forward to sending that check out to his family, and hopefully
cool.
putting some smiles on their faces.
Wow.
Right.
I just hope they get the color
together.
I just hope the colors on the flowers come in right, because I said I want white, black, and red flowers. So.
Huh. It should be bright. Actually,
Yeah.
It should be pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I said, if I know that Eric Feckler, he's one of the other admins on the page here. And when we found out Mike was sick, we first heard that there was a 2 to 3 week window, and it went down to 2 to 3 days, and then it was 24 hours. But Eric was going to load up. Eric was going to get his car loaded up on the trailer and go give Mike his last ride in a Tri-Fi, but it just happened so fast he couldn't do it.
Absolutely. That's the horrible thing about cancer in general. Every time you hear of someone, "Oh, they gave me 6 weeks." I'm sorry, that's 6 days.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've seen that so many times. It's just unbelievable.
Yep. So, but not to drone on. So I'm just very happy, like I said, to meet you, because honestly, we've had some guests on. I go, "Well, I'm not a racer. I don't pay attention to race cars or this or that." But I went through the articles and I started looking. I'm like, I've seen all the cars. I didn't put names to cars. I'm a page
Right.
turner in the magazine. But the subtle changes, like when you said no wires, under the hood of the car. Of course, I'm old school. I have a few wires, but we tried to hide as many as we could going, instead of going all behind on the firewall, going like all my wires go right into the back of my wheel well, so it's all kind of hidden and stuff like
Sure,
that. So,
yeah.
And everybody's got their purpose. Honestly, sometimes leaving your wires out is probably easier in the long run if you got an electrical problem come up. But, other than that, it's just the timeless stuff. So out of all your cars, and we're going to take the 55 out of it, through every one of them, your absolute favorite? Tough question.
One. Yeah, I don't have one. I like all of them still.
Do you have any you sold that you wish you wouldn't have sold?
Yeah, I don't know. The blue 67 Nova. It was stock suspension. The shock towers were cut to get a big block in it. And I never missed it per se, but you can imagine, now it's been 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It would be cool to have it back. I don't regret selling it, but it would be cool to have it back. And actually, the cool thing about it, though, is the individual that bought it is in Rhode Island, and it's absolutely the way I sold it to him in 1984.
That's
So
awesome.
that's pretty cool.
That shows a lot of respect for what you did.
Absolutely.
Because you see a lot of these, let's say, magazine famous cars from the 80s or the 70s, and people find them as the barn find and they've been destroyed.
Well, I'll give you a good example because this is the Tri-Fi page, and I'm surprised that it hasn't come up yet because I thought it was going to. So I'll bring it up in this fashion, actually. I've always been a 55 Chevy nut since I was young. And it seems also one of the other things in life seemed in the past to be any fantasy vehicle that you have, as you get more successful and make more money in life, that car escalates in value just enough for it to be unattainable, just right out of reach, right out of reach. But I happened across the 55 and was able to acquire it uh, 3 years after seeing Gary Koloski's 55. And Gary Koloski's 55, while I don't how do you term that inspiration, but I didn't choose to emulate it. But that
Right.
car inspired me to want to do a 55, and I bring up Gary's car, to come full circle with what you're talking about. Gary's car was sold to drug dealers, and they took and had a tube chassis built.
Hmm.
They had the top chopped,
Oh no.
and then they all got arrested or whatever. So that car was destroyed. Um, and actually, I have to back up a little bit. So I'd always heard that story for years, and that it never saw the street again. But I
Mm-hmm.
have seen pictures of it together with a chopped top and a tube chassis.
Right.
But I don't think a completed car. But anyway, so yeah, some stuff, and to me, that's the topic comes up a lot. Most iconic 55 on the planet. Period.
Right.
Okay, uh, my car, two lane blacktop, and Gary's car. And Gary's car's gone. It's gone.
Now, is this the
Um,
same? Is this the same Gary? Because he's from Minnesota, isn't he?
yeah,
He's
yeah,
now. Didn't he have the V12 55 Chevy?
yeah. He does now. Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
building a 57 with two V12s in it,
Ooh.
side by side.
It's
And
crazy.
it's yeah. We'll just use
I've seen
crazy.
his V12. He had it. He had it at Back to the 50s
Right.
in a spot. And in all honesty, you can walk right by it. If the doors and everything shut on it, you walk right by it because it's so
Sure.
subtle that you don't notice some things. And then I took a look at it, and I mean, it's just man, it's 100 pounds shoved into a 1 pound can,
Yeah.
and the workmanship. I can't even imagine the amount of dollar bills it takes to put that thing together.
Well, or the hours. I mean, the guy that built
Oh,
that's a maniac. Man, is that thing. This 57 is just guy's an engineering whiz kid. I mean, it's crazy, crazy. But again, to go back to his original car, I love that car, and actually, I can't think of how many years it's been already. Within the last 10 years. Well, let's back up. However long that Gary's current V12 car has been finished, prior to that, Gary called me and said, I'm considering replicating my original 55. And I got really excited. I was like, you have to do this.
Right.
And he said, or I'm thinking about doing this V12 thing. I'm like, no, 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 Gary, you need to do your old car. And so he chose to go the other way. So I said, do you mind if I do it? And he said, absolutely not. He said, I'll help you any way I can. And it so happens there was a thread on Gary's car on the Ham website,
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
and people were talking about it. And I actually supplied more information than most of the people were aware on there, about the car getting the top chopped and blah, blah, blah. And Gary chimed in some as well. But a guy from North Carolina chimed in and said, I have the original chassis. Straight the dropped axle, Olds rear end. I have the original chassis. So I contacted him and I asked him if he'd sell it to me, and he said yes. Um, but he said the chassis was in a warehouse in Long Beach, California,
But
and he was in North Carolina.
but then that means he doesn't
So,
exactly have it.
so we back and forth, back and forth. Meanwhile, I tracked down the original motor, and so all I need to do is just come up with a body. And then the chassis guy mysteriously sends me an email and says someone broke into the warehouse
Oh, of
and
course.
stole the axle and the rear end off the chassis. Okay, first bogus part of that story is initially he said the chassis itself was in a warehouse with a bunch of Rolls Royces and Duesenbergs, a bunch of antique, expensive cars.
Uh-huh.
So
Right.
what? Some Mexican, some gangbangers broke in there. And was like, oh, we got to have this '55 chassis. You know what I mean? Oh, the whole
Yeah.
story is just bullshit. Because Gary's car had a Minnesota Auto Specialties front axle. It was a dropped round tube axle with parallel leaves. A chrome Olds rear end. Can you imagine how much it cost to chrome an Olds rear
Oh,
end now?
jeez.
But there were so many specific components that would have been so priceless to get back.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I just screwed the whole project at that.
Right.
But,
Well,
Well, it,
yeah. If your heart loses it, it is what it is at that point.
yeah.
yeah.
Well, at this point, we're at an hour, and I don't want to cut everything short, but I try to keep us somewhere around an hour, so I'm going to give you two final questions, and maybe ask for, or and one of them may be asking for a story, quick story. One of the mob members asked, "Do you still have the black '57 hardtop?" And then
No,
is
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Go ahead. It was, and again, there's a story. I drove it to Clarksville, Tennessee, in around 1992 or three to do
Okay.
artwork on someone's hot rod.
Mm-hmm.
And when I pulled in the driveway, the guy said, "You drove this here?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a car. That's what you do with them." And he said, "I've got four street rods. This is in 1993. I've got four street rods. I've got over 100 grand in each one. I can't drive one of them around the block." And he said, "I got to have this car." And I said, "It's not for sale." And I have a long history with it, blah, blah, blah. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
"Give me a price." And I gave him some absurd price, and he said, "Okay." So he bought it. It went from him to another individual that I happened to have a interaction with in LA. He sold it to someone in Santa Barbara, California. He sold it to someone in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio called me one day and said they wanted to sell it, and one of my good friends bought it. My
Huh.
good friend owned it for, I don't even remember anymore, close to 20 years. Anyway, last year he got leukemia and died.
Oh no.
And I was not, I was actually out of town when all that happened. But because I wasn't aware of leukemia, he didn't tell anybody. But
Right.
anyway, I tried to acquire the car, and just to be sound as bitter as I am about it, I kind of got fucked out of that deal. And
Yeah.
the car ended up at a place called the Hot Rod Ranch in California,
Right.
and the guy stole it. And at the same time, he's, I mean, yeah, he's been in contact with me. We talk quite a bit. Number one, he's loved the car since he was a child. Number two, he swears he'll never sell it, but couldn't be in a better place than, because frankly, as we discussed at the beginning of this interview, I would have torn it apart. I would have wanted to redo all the suspension, update the fuel injection, blah blah blah. So it's probably best that someone else got it, because
Right.
he's just
Right.
shining it and driving the wheels off of it.
No, that's
So
well. If someone else is enjoying your artwork, that's more important
yeah,
sometimes.
Right.
yeah, he's not going to change anything. So yeah, it's cool.
Cool.
Okay,
I got
what was the
a
other one? Go ahead.
I got a question for you, Scott. So we've talked about all the cars you built. Is this what you've done for a living, or what do you do to pay the bills?
Like I said, initially I would paint cars. Then that turned into a pretty lengthy career doing artwork on cars. But that slowly morphed into build cars.
Right.
Okay,
So now I just build cars for people.
perfect. Doesn't get
Well,
better. If your hobby is good and it turns into work, then you've got a great job.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Providing you don't get burnt out, and for some reason I don't. I mean, I live this 24/7, and I don't mind. I mean, I really enjoy it. So
Well,
it's been
it
good.
sounds like you get to, from what I've seen and from what listening to you, you get to change up. It's not like you're doing a 64 Impala every single day, all year round. You're
Correct.
not just replacing panels, and you get to have an artistic flair because now maybe you do just straight up restoration sometimes, but I'm sure you still would put up your
Nah.
flair.
Yeah, no, I've not done any, and frankly, the excuse me, the one I'm working on a 61 Impala for a customer right now, and he's a really, really good guy. It started out being a paint job, and that escalated into a car built so fast it'd make your head swim. I mean, he started talking about changes. Next thing you know, everything, and he loves all of my ideas. He trusts me with everything, and I'm really excited. This is going to be a neat car, and mostly because it seems like we were actually had the discussion today. For some reason, 61 Impalas are like the darling of the hot rod world right now. Every
Yep,
major shop, there's so many 61s being built right now, and every one of them are identical. And ours is not.
Well,
So
you
we're
know,
excited to
it
get it
kind of
done.
comes to, people kind of run with the same
Trends.
idea or trend, and it's just whatever they can throw together, and try and either a beat the other guy out the door, to the show, or b it's just a, well, we really didn't have any of our own ideas, so we just kind of cheated off of his paper and
Uh,
science and
one of
math
my
class.
one of my one of my favorite things to say is look around and see all the trends around you. Then you know that I'm doing the absolute opposite at all times. I mean, which is
perfect.
just
That's
really, really, really smart when you think about it. But
yeah.
if I see a trend, I run the other way.
Well, be a
Perfect.
trendsetter yourself rather than following the trend that's out there.
Indeed, yeah, it's much more fun.
Well,
Oh yeah,
it's obvious it's obviously worked for you because I said that the two I've got two your 55 and 54 pulled right up on my screen. I have the whole time here, and just like honestly, the 55 screams to me because it's a 55, but it's
Sure.
like you not knowing the car, not seeing it in person. It looks like it was just built within the last few years because it's timeless. Yeah. Should I say that there are some guys that have painted bumpers that it looks absolutely awful? Yep, there is some.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
It,
Yeah,
but
just
you've either tucked them in or altered them in a way where it works with the art of the whole car, right?
right.
And
It is
when you
part of the whole car too.
I've seen a lot of red 55 Chevys, and all of a sudden there's a full red bumper on it where they got the bumperettes and everything on there, and you're going, yeah, that's not quite right,
Hmm.
So it's timeless, and the subtle changes. Like I noticed on the 54, you've got the rear wheel opener lowered. If that makes it, you
Hmm.
added into there. Everything's my history teacher in high school had a 54. Never drove it. Sat alongside his garage. I don't know why, but there's subtle changes, and I listened also, like on the your driving lights or parking lights up front. That you were talking about recessing, all of those
Yeah,
subtle
a half
details.
inch.
Yeah, and if nobody knew, unless you have two 54s next to it, your attention to detail is above and beyond, and it's the subtle things like you want it to look like it should have came from the factory that way in the first place, almost.
Well,
So
one of the things we like to say is you want to look at something that's finished and say, why is that car right? I have
yep.
no idea why that car is different, but it is. If you can't point it out, that's and actually another one of my famous sayings, I'm willing to go to any extreme to make it look like nothing happened.
yeah.
Boy,
That's
that's the
Oh,
truth.
it's just metal. You can always cut it and weld it and make it what you want.
Yep.
no, it's beautiful work, man. I appreciate meeting you and enjoyed our talk.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it this week. I thank you very much, Scott, for taking time out of your evening, to talk to us. I thoroughly enjoyed it, to the point where here at future date and time, I'd like to have you on a second time because there's so much more that we can talk about and delve into and understand. Pick the brain of Scott Sullivan. Um, so I really
It's
appreciate
dangerous
you
in
taking your
there.
time. And well, you know, I think it's dangerous inside the mind of any car guy.
That's a
But
good point.
you know, I do appreciate you taking the time to join us and talk to us. And at that point, I think that we're going to kind of call it for this week. You know, we're a little farther over an hour than what we normally go. You know, I try to keep these around an hour for the viewers.
I told you I'd talk your ear off.
Oh,
That's
that's
good.
okay. That's good. So we appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Everybody watching the mob, thanks for watching tonight. Everybody watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you. We will see you again next week. Thanks for tuning in to Live in the Mob with your hosts, Daniel, Craig, and Joey. Special thank you to our background designer, Chad Reynolds. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you again next week.